bring something up on screen so that you can see the spreadsheet as it's been amended. So, Chair, what we've done just over that break was just amend this significant activities table as per the discussion that occurred earlier. So we have now an activity here for Coromandel bypass, which has been split so that the pre-implementation phase is now $1 million, retained at the current position of number 8. And then further down the list, we come in and we have the balance of that activity, which is now considered implementation, with the remaining $34 million at position 23. So that came in just under 22. So I know it was 22 before, but we didn't move the top one, so they didn't shuffle. But it's still relative in terms of where it is.
No,
so
I'm happy with that, especially keeping that one at still number 8 for the $1 million. So is everyone happy with that then?
Excellent, thank you. And then what we can do then is supply Dave with this, and it becomes a part of the agenda. Yeah.
And is that the actual number? Or is
no,
that just gone?
This is the number that we were submitted originally. The million is effectively a placeholder to put it into that position, just so that we've got something as an activity. But what we will do before we take it to the RTC in June is clarify that just with the team. Yeah.
Well done, team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll move on. Oh, sorry, Madeline.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just one point to keep in your pocket for later in the day when we come back and talk about significance of changes. I think you can be assured that what we've done here today with this new list is that the flavour hasn't changed. So there might have been some movement in the program, prioritised program, but in terms of what went out to submitters, you can feel comfortable that the overall flavour hasn't changed. And I think that's a really good place to be in terms of being able to defend the changes that have been made.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Madeline. Okay, Nigel, on to part A then, if we can get that out of the way for A to D.
So team will just deal with the part A components, which will be the amendment of the front end of the plan. So resolutions A through D on the report, but the first 1 to 4 on the attachment 1.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can just point out, so you're wanting to look at the recommendations, page 20, 1 to 4, is that correct? So I'll just point out they pertain to changes that we will make to the front end of the document, the regional policy framework, to support increased consistency with the GPS. So that's really just showing you what parts of the plan in the front end that we're going to change as a result of discussions about the back end as well.
Yeah. So anyone needs discussion on that? No?
So for example, you're bringing the RONs into the program. We're going to amend sections in the front part of the regional policy framework to recognise the RONs and to provide policy foundations for that.
Okay. So we might as well have a mover and a second for this. Yep. Let Dave speak to what we've changed and what we've done.
We have modified Part BF of the motion that we will update the significant transport activities table in line with the discussion that we've just had. And when these minutes are published, that table will be included in the minutes as Appendix 1. So it will be wholly transparent as to what table we're referring to in this resolution. So it's sort of, the minutes will stand on their own merits.
Okay. Is everyone happy with that? Is that clear? It's pretty clear to me. So we've got a motion and we need a mover and a seconder from Part A and Part B from A to L. I'm not going to read it all out because I started reading the first one. So is everyone happy with that? That was sent as one. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Kevin, and a seconder. Thank you, Eugene. All those in favour? Is against? Carried. Thank you. Right, good discussion on that one, which was inevitable was going to. So we'll go on to the next, Nigel.
Sorry, LJ, if we might be able to bring the PowerPoint back up. And we'll skip maybe 2 ahead. I think we've got one that's a placeholder for, oh, there we are, perfect. You're right there. So the second aspect that we're going to have a look at breaks down, I guess, the recommendations by theme. And you will have seen, again, through the report, some of the rationale that we've got to support that, but equally, again, this is how we are responding to particular subject matter areas, and they have their own recommendations under each one. Now, I'm actually going to turn this over to the team for this one. Do you want to take this one, Julie? So I'll just turn over to Julie.
Morning, Julie.
Good morning. Thank you, Nigel. It's really good to be making progress. So the topics that I've addressed in terms of the in response to submitter requests and comments, the first one I dealt with was climate change. So I just want to take you through what people said on the whole and what we're recommending that you might do in light of the other information in the GPS, etc. So on the whole, there were submissions, they were strongly supportive of having the climate change provisions in the RLTP. You'll remember that the GPS came out on the last day of our submissions closing, and there was, I guess, some surprise that there was not really anything about climate change in the GPS except to delay what might go in the final GPS once the government had looked at what the recommendations of the Climate Change Commission might be. So prior to people knowing that there was going to be a delay, they were very responsive and supportive of what was in the plan, and there wasn't anybody who asked for things to be removed, etc. So they all agreed that transformation of the land transport system is required to reduce emissions and to achieve climate change targets. There's a list of what their submissions kind of focused on. So there's a need for an integrated and multimodal transport system, systemic transition away from car-centric transport planning. A challenge is the level of communications with the community and trying to lead them through to making changes in their own lives to achieve the outcomes. There's growth problems, an integrated approach, support for rail as a means of reducing transport emissions from freight, support for references to the MSP, the Regional Public Transport Plan and Access Hamilton initiatives, and supporting the development and improvement of travel options for people in areas to make choices. Then there was the things, the submissions related to the headline targets, which we had as 41% because that was based on the emissions reduction plan, and that's a national target, and should we achieve all the things set out in that, that would equate to 41%. So some districts ask for a district by district breakdown of the target for them in particular, and others asked to just revisit the 41%, where did that come from? Then there were, just trying to think. Oh, and then there was concern that the objectives and policies to reduce the emissions are not reflected in the funding chapters. And we now know that to be even more true because a lot of the MSP activities have gone. Then we've also lost the climate emissions relief funding and the vehicle kilometre travelled program. Then there's the rebate on the electric vehicles and all those sorts of things that will add up to perhaps not be able to achieve the outcomes that we sought in the original plan. Some submissions said we need to find the balance between funding the maintenance and renewal of the strategic transport network so that people can continue to move around without jeopardising the low carbon network. So there's that whole, well, we've already got this, how are we going to move to low carbon if we're spending, we don't want to jeopardise the low carbon network by spending money on other things necessarily. Strong support for mode shift. And then other, the more minor submissions were further detail about the effects of climate change. One of them mentioned extreme heat and advocacy for more EV charging stations and ways in which to reduce car travel. So while there's strong support from the submitters, climate change and emissions reduction is a notable omission from the GPS at this stage. So the GPS, the draft one, signals a delay in climate change policy until later in 2024. You probably remember that we wrote submissions to the GPS from both Future Proof, the RTC and WRC, all asking for that, and I'm fairly confident we're not the only organisation or council who would have done that. So the GPS says that, the draft GPS says that the emissions reduction plan 2, that's the national plan, so ERP 2, that will inform the final GPS. So until then, we don't actually know what the policy direction is. But in spite of all of that, as has been mentioned around the table several times this morning, this is a long-term plan. This is a regional view. We think that we would recommend that the climate change provisions, as they are with some minor tweaks, be retained in the RLTP. One, there's strong support from the submitters, so we would be responding to those. The climate change and emissions reduction policy direction is in other legislation, other statutes, other plans, not just in the GPS. We can review what comes out when the final GPS arrives, and we can decide then if what we've still got is robust and it still stacks up and it's still consistent. The evidence on which we based the original provisions in the RLTP has not changed. We've still got 14%, transport emissions. We're still the highest emitter in the country of emissions, of total greenhouse gases. And if we also make the decision on the MSP provisions to keep them in as, a long-term view, the transformative change to reduce emissions comes from some of that work. So they go hand in hand. So it's important to think about both when we're talking about that. So the RLTP relies on the suite of MSP activities to achieve those outcomes. And climate change is a long-term problem. It needs a long-term vision. So we're working towards net zero emissions by 2050 in many other areas, even just within the WRC, in terms of public transport, etc. And we've had some discussions with Hamilton City in particular, because that's where the bulk of the MSP activities will be, and decided that we need to think in small steps, small incremental changes over time, that will help us achieve the longer term vision. So while it was, fantastic to be thinking about, hey, if we just change this in a short period of time, we'll have an immediate effect on emissions, we may have to just rethink about the pace at which we do those things in order to take people along with us and just do the small things that might fit into other funding classes like low cost, low risk, etc. And the provisions as they stand still help us to meet other strategic priorities in the new GPS, the draft one, such as economic growth and productivity, and low carbon modes like cycling and walking will still help to reduce congestion, improve efficiency of the network. So small baby steps rather than one big transformative change in a short period of time. So that's it for the climate change provisions. And I guess what we need from you is whether you keep them in or out, wait for, with a view to, or if you're keeping them in, understand that we would have to undertake a review when the final GPS comes out in July, so that we would know if we still stack up against that and are still consistent. And with some minor tweaks around some wording about, extreme heat and things like that.
Thanks, Julie. This one's, to me, was at our priority. So it's retain the climate change headline targets, clarify baseline data and transport emissions to ensure accuracy and refer the effects of climate change. Is everyone happy with that? Because we'll split these down to have a motion first to pass these as we go through. David.
Just a comment, as we lead up to the final GPS, I think the commentary in paragraph G, in the context of these climate change provisions, is going to be really, really important. So the more we can emphasise the other aspects of, for example, metro spatial plan, so congestion reduction, the economic benefit that goes from that in terms of, productive industry being able to move around more easily, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be a really important component and will be strongly reflected, I suspect, in the final GPS.
Yeah, and that's the sort of tweaking of the provisions that we can do to make it sort of look less climate changey and more economic growth and productivity in order to get ourselves over the line.
Yeah, and it's not just about how it looks. I mean, that's the reality, right? And I think what we need to be reflecting is, we've seen what you've said in the GPS. We've prioritised the aspects of the metro spatial plan that most strongly provide for reduction in congestion and increase in economic productivity in Hamilton City and Waipa and the outlying areas.
Len? Thanks,
Thank
David.
you. Just real quick, thanks, Julie. My comments earlier on about the data of detours and broken roads and the resilience aspects of when you are in recovery mode from storm events, is it worth making a link or getting some of that data in there? Under N, you've got clarified baseline data and transport emissions. Is it worth making that connection with some supporting data as part of that narrative?
It was brought up in the committee. I mean, I brought it up right at the beginning, just when roads are closed, there must be, some data that would be able to say, well, this is what it's costing in climate change to do this detour for, so long. So I think that is an important.
So the data's there. I mean, I reached out to David yesterday and the data's there. So can I leave that with you to consider?
I appreciate that Cormando prepared that analysis, but looking at the whole region, we don't have the emission coming from road closure data. So currently it's harder to link the road closure emission coming from road closure with climate change targets.
Why?
Because we have only Coromandel data, and we don't have other areas data yet. The
Okay.
headline target is looking at the regional level. And you have Coromandel data.
Well, we get it from Waka Kotahi, and it links not just Coromandel, but Hauraki. So if roads are closed and traffic is diverted and you're adding to VKTs, you're getting higher emissions, and it must have an effect on your climate change targets.
Yes,
Sorry, through the-
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah, sorry, Julie.
Yeah, we do have the supporting document that has all the climate change and emissions reduction evidence and data in the back of it, as well as Appendix A, which is a summary of that much bigger document. We could certainly look to bring some of that data forward into the front part of the plan that would make it more clear why there is still a problem and why we still need to reflect that in the plan. And I think it might just be about, beefing it up even more and linking it to the resilience issues, like you say.
Thank you, Julie. And it just would seem to be really strong evidence to support everything that we're talking about.
Yes.
So if it helps,
Yep.
it's there.
They're inextricably linked. We know that driving further over time creates the problems with emissions, which then creates the climate change issues and the hazards associated with it.
Yep.
Just thinking, so if I probably couldn't go right now, that's what the resolution should say, but we can certainly make sure that there is a bit more information in the front of the plan as opposed to in the supporting document or even in the appendix. That would make it a bit clearer what we're trying.
I think we can,
get to.
that comes under, Julie, just the N, to
Yep.
clarify the baseline. We can add it into that,
Yes.
just make it more
Yes.
robust. That's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
'Cause there's,
Yeah.
if there's any of that information, with obviously there is some from Waka Kotahi that can be incorporated in there.
Yep.
Okay, any other oh yeah, sorry,
Just-
David.
Just, so the data from Waka Kotahi is vehicle kilometres, vehicles per day
Yep.
through these networks. So we have got a monitor at Hikawai, which is why we know how much, we know that it went from something like 5,000 cars a day to 80 cars a day when we closed,
Okay.
when the weather event closed Staroe 25A. We know what the data was when the road out to Raglan 23 was
23.
closed. But to be honest, that will disappear in the era. Coromandel was unique in that it was 300 plus days. What was Staroe 23 was a week. So I think there's a really good argument that Len's making around investment in resilience and the cost of not investing in resilience in terms of carbon impacts of those big events. But I'd just be careful not to overplay that hand in the wider climate reduction, because it'll disappear into insignificance when you look at Hamilton City, for example.
Yeah.
If everyone walked instead of drove to the dairy, you'd get a bigger number than you did for
Yes.
Staroe 25A.
Yeah.
So that, but the resilience argument and the climate impact, I think, is a significant one.
Yeah.
It's just context is important.
Kevin?
Yep, I just agree with Dave. I just need to be really careful how far we push this one, because there's, choosing my words carefully here, there is significant debate over a range of things, and if we emphasise this beyond what the data is saying, we're just buying an argument, and I'm just not sure that that's going to be helpful. The resilience, that's great, but the climate change, I mean, without being too melodramatic, if the whole country dropped under the ocean tomorrow morning, it would make that much difference to global emissions. And if we beat ourselves up over what we're doing, I'm not saying ignore it, it's important for more reasons than just the emissions that we're producing. It's our place in the global economy. But I just don't want, as David says, just not overplay it.
Okay. No other discussion, and we've got a resolution here that recommended amendments to the regional land transport plan on the other submitted issues on climate change, retain the climate change headline targets, as I said, clarify baseline data and transport emissions to ensure accuracy and refer to the effects of climate change. So going to have a mover and a seconder for that motion. Thank you, Len, and a seconder. Thank you, Rodney. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, Metro Spatial Plan.
Yep, that's
You
me again.
again, Julie.
So we've talked a little bit about the Metro Spatial Plan this morning and the part that it plays in trying to achieve all sorts of transport outcomes for the region. So we know it's an integral part of the long-term vision. And the policy framework at the front of the plan was built around MSP as being like a central pillar to achieving all of the different objectives, as well as growth and economic productivity, which is now a priority in the draft GPS. So we know, and we've already discussed, that there were MSP activities in the prioritised significant activities list, and that they've been withdrawn both by Whakakotahi NZTA and Hamilton City Council. But in saying that, there weren't actually many individual submitters that submitted on MSP provisions in the plan. Hamilton City did, Waipa and Waikato District did. And again, trying to think of it in terms of the wider objectives, trying to achieve across the longer term, we still think that it's beneficial to retain them in the RLTP going forward. So, and reiterating again what I said about small baby steps along the way to retain the MSP, signal it as being important for all sorts of reasons, yeah, just keeping it as a longer term vision with short steps in between to get there. We know that there are funding challenges across the board for all of these things, and sorry, I'm just going back to my notes here. Yeah, so we don't really want to lose sight of what we're trying to achieve. So we think that you're on quite safe ground to keep those provisions in the RLTP, because submitters that did submit were strongly supportive to achieve the long-term vision. It's a long-term plan to be achieved by many incremental improvements into the metro area spatial plan through public transport and in the future more walking and cycling. It will provide wider benefits to the metro area, such as what we've already talked about in terms of reducing congestion, reducing emissions, improving productivity. So some business cases remain in the significant activities list, and that will ensure that those projects are ready to proceed should funding become available, whether it's in the next 3-year plan or whether the government introduces a new funding pool in the shorter term. An inclusion of the MSP provisions, or retaining them in there, ensures consistency with the GPS, especially in relation to achieving the strategic priority of government of economic growth and productivity. So most of the submission points can be addressed within the text of the RLTP, and I've got a list there. Not sure what page it is on the agenda because I don't even have that in front of me. Is on
Page 14.
28, thanks. So there's a few things in there that were sought mainly by the submitters such as Hamilton City Council and the other future-proof partners. Some of it were really into, just basic things like amending the map and fixing some errors. But the main thing is again, like the climate change, do we want to keep it in to signal, which I would strongly recommend that you do, because it is a central pillar to so many of the other objectives that the plan is trying to achieve over the longer term. Yes. So yeah.
Thanks,
so we're
Julie.
ready to have you make a decision on that. Thanks.
Angela?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for your commentary, Julie, and yeah, really endorse what you're saying about keeping the line of sight on the MSP, because it is those small changes over a long term that are going to get us to where we need to be. Just had a specific question about a submitter, which we can take it offline if needed. GoBus mentioned shared bus and freight lanes. Have you? Oh, I'll touch base with you after.
Oh, well, I could
Okay.
clarify that that excerpt in the RLTP is taken out of the future-proof strategy. So it wasn't necessarily our words.
Yep.
So I think that what we could do is make it very clear that that's not necessarily what the RLTP is saying we should do, but that it is a future-proof idea.
If I can just
Mm.
clarify that, it's actually the Metro Spatial Business Plan.
Sorry, that's what I
So
meant,
the
yeah.
insert, unfortunately, when it came out as a draft, it was missing its, we had some case studies like, opportunities for rail and MSP was sort of like a case study and it was supposed to look different to the rest of the plan. And it was actually the Metro Spatial Plan business case, and it was directly quoting from the business case of what the business case wanted to achieve over time, which was a case study like we took with rail in terms of looking at long-term opportunities. So it's just a matter of clarifying that that is actually in the business case. It's not our policy. So unfortunately, it was a misinterpretation that probably arose from the way it was presented in the draft.
Yeah,
The
no.
way it was printed, which was a shame.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, it's difficult to know
Yeah.
who's responsible for what.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
We'll
we can,
make
yeah,
we
something
can
to-
clarify that.
I'll keep in mind when we are looking at
Yep.
MSP things moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, team, we've got a resolution here. If there's no other discussion on the Metro Spatial Plan amendments, I won't read it right through if you have all read it out in the full one. So I can have a mover and a seconder that the spatial plan amendments be made. Thank you, Eugene, and a seconder. Thanks, Kevin. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, Nigel, on to the next one.
Thank you, Councillor Downard. So next on your list, you have headline targets and KPIs, and I'll introduce it, but again, I'll say for the technical questions that you might have, I'll bring Kana into it. So there have been a few submissions that were made specifically on headline targets, and as you'll remember, they support the region's strategic vision and objectives. So we actually had 9 that came through, and they did relate to a number of different areas. So there was climate change and resilience and growth and accessibility, and also some question about whether or not we'll be able to meet a 41% reduction in terms of our climate emissions, as noted for climate change. I won't read through them; they're on page 29 of the agenda. And again, probably just by way of reference, those headline targets that we've adopted are SMART, specific, measurable, accurate, robust, and trackable. And so in some ways, we're not actually able to respond to submission requests, just because we need to make sure that they're consistent with that. And so again, this is where it does take a little bit of tweaking to get it right. And then also just noting that some of the monitoring that we do actually comes under different frameworks that already are pre-existing, and public transport, rail freight and air quality are some of those areas. So there are only a few recommendations in here, including, adaptation to baseline, and clarifying terminology and an action for council. But through you, Chair, happy for any comments in this space. And
Any
I might
comments
direct
on
that to Kana.
the headline targets or KPIs? It's, yeah, as you say, it's just tweaking. So yeah, so there's a resolution up on the board for the changes or amendments on the headline targets and KPIs. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Happy to, yeah, thank you, Len, and a seconder. Thank you, Rodney. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay. Importance of maintenance.
Right,
Julie.
Mr. Chair. this
Oh, no,
was
sorry,
actually,
Madeline.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
This was actually quite a key theme that came through quite strongly from some of our key transport partners, the likes of AA, Transporting New Zealand, Fed Farmers, and you know, a lot of it was to do with, I guess, sort of highlighting and elevating the you know, crucial role that maintenance plays in the context of resilience, but in the context of our huge, you know, state highway and local road network through the Waikato region. And you might note that AA came to the hearing and tabled a summary. And I think Councillor Taylor, you asked at the hearing that you were keen on understanding where submitters had come with new information. And AA was one of those submitters where originally their submission was asking for maintenance to be the overarching priority over everything else. And that would have been very difficult because our high level 10-year priorities are not prioritised within themselves. And so anyway, the AA came to the hearing with a slightly modified version and agreed that they would be happy with Part A, the regional policy framework, elevating the narrative around maintenance and ensuring that there are good sort of policies in there supporting that. So we think we've covered it pretty well in the plan, but we've put our heads together, and you can see in the recommended amendments there. In section 2, the key opportunities, and we were just talking about the MSP opportunity box. You know, there's also the rail opportunity box, and there was also one for trying to remember what it was called, rural focus on opportunities through PT activities and things. So what we thought we could do is elevate this whole strategic roading and the importance of local roading, particularly for the likes of, you know, the Fed Farmers submission. We could perhaps have an opportunity box there looking to the future role and importance of strategic roading in the Waikato region, which balances the other things. And we could bring in the importance of maintenance there and just talk about that in an integrated sort of way. Also, that provides us an opportunity to bring in the RONS information through from the GPS and talk about the key RONS projects in our region as well. So we thought that might be a tidy way of addressing some of those key submitter issues on maintenance. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks you, Madeline. Yeah, well, as the resolution says, it's update and strengthen, and I think that does will address the submitters' issues on that. So any other discussion on that headline, on the recommended amendments? If not, can I have a mover and seconder the strategic importance of maintenance amendments to the regional land transport plan be accepted? Thank you, Len. Seconded by Kevin. All those in favour? Those against? Carried.
I may as well just talk about the rural focus because it sort of relates. So it's sort of a perennial submitter issue that we always get because, you know, particularly for this draft plan that went out, there was a very concentrated focus on MSP. And under the previous government, it looked like we could achieve a lot through focusing on our MSP activities and trying to promote a whole lot of stuff, not at the expense of the rest of the region, because obviously resilience was a key focus and not just on the Coromandel, as you can see, you know, around other parts of the region. But we have had requests to strengthen the focus on rural issues. Alongside that, a number of submitters, and particularly quite a few on the Coromandel, talked about sustainable funding for rural communities and smaller towns and the huge burden of the resilience issue on ratepayers. So we picked that up as well. So we think we can strengthen the focus on rural issues in the plan. That just requires us going through the front end and incorporating perhaps some funding policies and actions there as well. So if you have any burning ideas or you'd like to see particular areas strengthened, do let us know.
Glenn?
Thanks, Madeline. Just a clarification. When you are talking about aquaculture and forestry, do they fall under that rural umbrella, or are they?
I think so too.
They
Yeah.
do, yeah. So
But I
that
think we
is-
could strengthen the whole narrative around some of those, you know, regional industries, if you like, that in our section 2, which is the context.
that would be really
part,
helpful.
And also in the opportunities box as well, in terms of the role that the, you know, that the regional, local and state highway network play in facilitating that economic development. That also plays nicely into the GPS strategic priorities.
Same language. Yep.
So I think there's opportunity there to integrate quite a lot of things that submitters are looking for and make us more consistent.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Okay. Yep, Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I'm comfortable with that, but the only comment I'd make is when you look at that, and there is, and further out in the regions, a view that this committee could arguably be quite Hamilton-centric, given the largest population base is here, and quite a bit of money gets sucked into the expressway and Hamilton City. However, when I look through the priority list that we went through earlier, that does not support that view. I'm not suggesting that as a factual view, but I just wonder, in terms of the narrative around this, whether we leverage off what we've already agreed to around the priority, which is actually very much rural focused, very much Coromandel. Thank you very much, Bully Point, you know, which is rural. So I think we are actually doing what we say we're doing, but I just wonder, let's leverage off what we've already agreed to illustrate the point. So I wasn't a question, just a comment.
Yeah,
That's a great point. And as I said before, we need to rewrite that whole section 4, which is the narrative around the program. So there's huge opportunity there to tweak that narrative and to reflect what you've decided.
yeah, and I think you've
Sorry, just
incorporated that in the motion, in
Yeah.
the resolution that's coming up here, where, you know, the framework to, policy framework to.
I mean, if you go back to submitters and say, thank you for submission, oh, by the way, this is what we've done.
Okay, so we've got a resolution there for consideration, a rural focus. I'll move it. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Rodney. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, we're on to transport options. Julie.
So this is about accessibility and transport options, which is giving people, if we provide the options across the region, people have choices available to them. There were only a few submissions about this sort of thing. Obviously, the Coromandel submitters were, you know, overwhelmingly represented in the submitter tallies. So, and I'm not sure what it's been like in the past in terms of accessibility and transport options, but the ones who did submit were all supportive, and there were very few requests for or suggestions for changes to what was already in there. So but there were the odd one that asked for a particular public transport service or improvements to, you know, a particular cycleway or, you know, down in the details like that. There was specific support for the new funding model for public transport across the region, which is a Waikato Regional Council long-term plan matter that is being considered this week. So there were only a few changes requested, and they were around just changing, not the whole options that might be provided, but just some minor tweaking to the words. So especially around terminology, Hamilton City Council, you know, reminded us that had used transport options and transport choice interchangeably throughout the plan, and we needed to make that distinction. The Waikato Regional Airport and Titanium Park wanted public transport connections to and from the airport, which would support the development of the Peacock's Growth Cell, Airport Business Node, and Southern Waikato townships. Improve public transport across the Coromandel Hauraki districts. So those ones that were specific like that, we can forward to our public transport planning team and they will, ascertain where to from there. Apart from that, it was very minor. So we just wanted to, accommodate submitted requests where it was appropriate and made sense to do, like the Hamilton City response, and to include a new action in the policy template to advocate to NZTA the importance of cost share contribution to fund bus services. That came from Thames Coromandel. So that is just very minor.
Thanks, Julie. Everyone happy with the changes, the amendments? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder for accessibility and transport options. Thank you, Len, and the seconder. Please, I'll second it. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, safety. Lee.
Good morning, everyone. We're still morning. Yep, we are 10 minutes to go. So around a third of the submissions were received on the safety provisions of the RLTP. These were largely supportive of the vision, objectives and policies with strong support for continued work in the road safety space. Many submitters were in support of the safe system approach. So there's no change proposed to the current objective in the RLTP, which is a safe, accessible transport system in the Waikato region where no one is killed or seriously injured. So that still stands. We will, however, tweak the narrative to reflect the latest national road safety policy and language, which is changing, as requested by submitters as well. So specific words like, road to zero and things like that may be changed depending on national direction. So most general safety concerns were raised by submitters from Coromandel and Wharawhara communities. These were more on local issues, so concern around speed management, interventions, enforcement, footpaths, intersections, cycling and pedestrian safety, and also addressing the safety concerns of the one-lane bridges in Tairua. There was support for road safety promotion activities in the program, and also, as you heard at the hearings, improving safety at the State Highway 2339 intersection in Wharawhara, and the urge to lower speed limits through there. So all of these local safety issue concerns will be forwarded to the District Council for consideration. And there were some other concerns from submitters around safe travel modes to access education, investment that improves road safety, which includes maintenance and upgrades of rural roads, which Madeline addressed previously. The need for additional safety implementation actions in the RLTP, which I'm looking at now. And we had a few submitters suggesting that we could add some in there. And also, as I said before, just adopting the new language to the new GPS, so away from Vision Zero under the last government's GPS. And just continuing to work with the neighbouring councils and NZTA to address serious crashes in the region, because our statistics are still quite grim.
Yep.
But since consultation on the draft RLTP went out, the policy framework for speed management has changed, and regional councils are no longer required to develop speed management plans. So this announcement came out in December. MOT announced that the amendments to the setting of speed limits rule to stop blanket speed limit reductions and start work on replacing the rule. That work hasn't come about, and we haven't really been updated on much more since. But just the requirement that developing speed management plans is no longer mandatory for regional councils. Also, safety in the GPS has been more around investment in road policing and nationally consistent and coordinated road safety promotion through enforcement and behavioural change, rather than blanket speed limit reductions. So over to you for the recommendations.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, any discussions on those 4 bullet points for the amendments? Glenn?
Thank you, Kimberly. Just a recognition from the discussions that we've had, and it was brought up at the submission hearings as well, about a clear desire for local decision-making on critical speed limits, particularly in CBDs. And I'm talking urban areas rather than outside schools and marae, but it was brought up, and it's been brought up. We've had people organising public meetings. Is there a way to reflect that in our final document?
Yeah, I think so. The message was quite clear that decisions are better made locally than, you know, regionally, so, or nationally, I should say. So we could speak to that more in the part A of the body of the text, to say that, you know, safety is something that you consult with your local communities about, and anything to do with speed limit setting and all of that has been, you know, consulted on with the communities. So we could beef that up a little bit in the narrative. I think that it's an important issue.
Thank you. That's it in a nutshell. Appreciate it.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I just add to that, obviously we need to comply with the land transport setting of speed rule when it comes out. Yeah. So we will need to obviously comply with it, but this is an issue that I think we could take through the Regional Road Safety Forum and look at, you know, have a collective conversation around how we want to proceed ourselves with speed management. There's probably nothing preventing a region from doing some sort of regional speed management plan. It's just now no longer explicitly required. So my thoughts are that's the place to probably progress the conversation.
Thanks, Madeline. I guess, sorry, David. I guess my concern is a response to the intervention by the current Minister for Land Transport, who is telling councils what their speed limits are going to be in their urban CBD areas, and somehow getting a message across there that that's an overstep, that is an overreach, and local people want control over that. Now, how it fits in the framework, I'll leave it to you guys. Know what your compliance has to be, but we're certainly getting that loud and clear from our communities. We'll decide, thank you, not you in Wellington.
Okay, no other comments. I see you quickly turned your mic off again, David.
Sorry.
So these the 4 bullet points for the. Oh, yep. Sorry, Kevin.
Just a comment. There does, however, need to be consistency, and that's really important. And I hark back to my former career. It's around what we used to call self-explaining roads. If it looks and feels like 50 kilometres an hour, the number needs to reflect that. It's no point in just slapping up signs if the engineering and look and feel of the road doesn't match it. And I get where this government has changed the rules. I'm not necessarily in favour of a lot of the changes that have occurred, but I also get the local, and I think it is important to have the local say, but that needs to be consistently reflected across the wider regions. No point in going through one town where the locals say, this is 70, you go through the next town, it looks exactly the same, and it's 40. It's like, that's just inviting disaster.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Madeline.
Chair, if I can just add to that, you might recall that must be a couple of years ago now, or maybe even a bit longer, but as part of those early conversations we had around regional speed management, we developed regional speed management principles, which everyone signed up to, and they were going to be the sort of foundation, if you like, for developing a regional speed management plan. So we put a lot of work into, you know, trying to aim for that regional consistency and had a lot of conversations around it. So it'd be a shame to let that work and those principles just be dropped. So again, that's something maybe we can take take that initial agreement regionally to the forum and see where to from here.
Thank you for that. I agree. Local councils absolutely can set the speed limits, Thames Coromandel, Taupo, Waipa, whatever, providing we're consistent with an agreed set of principles at a principled level, then it falls down from there. Yeah.
Yep, Len?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I probably don't want to get into a discussion around this. I'm going to push back a little bit on what Kevin said, because what we have is a situation where local people, and particularly in Tauranga City Council, have said, we think 30 is safe, and that we are local people, we know, and you have a minister who stepped in and said, you're wasting your money, forget it, don't waste your time, it's going to be 50, end of story. So we don't want to be a slave to consistency when local people are looking at their own situation and saying, we know what's safest, we know what's best. This is nuts. If it's any more than that, why isn't anyone listening to us? So I agree with consistency, but let's not be a slave to it and not listen to local people who they live there, they know best. So, thank you. I'll shut up now.
Yep, thank you for that robust discussion. Getting back to the submitters now. Yep, so we've got these 4 updates on the sorry, not updates, amendments to the safety. Kind of mover and a seconder that they be accepted. Yep, thank you, Angela, and I'll second it. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, we'll do one more. We've got rail, so we'll go on to rail before lunch. Kimberly.
Rail, and we have our resident rail expert in the room with us as well, so that's handy. Any questions, please direct them to Phil. Rail, around a third of submissions were received on both passenger and freight rail. In the draft RLTP, all submitters were in support of interregional passenger rail and rail as an efficient means of moving freight. So nobody opposed it. We had strong support for Te Huia. However, since the draft RLTP was notified, the interregional rail activity class has been removed from the new draft GPS. So the future funding is now required to come from the public transport infrastructure activity class. And I understand a decision on the future funding for Te Huia will be made on Thursday. Is that right? Yeah. But despite this, Te Huia came through for strong support from our submitters. It's still a regional priority to retain services, with some submitters explicitly requesting for an extension to the service and interregional passenger rail. Some submission points specific to Te Huia and regional passenger rail included just overall support in the efforts to transform the region towards an environmentally sustainable low carbon transport system. It enables accessibility and transport options, contributes to road safety outcomes and economic productivity. There's a financial benefit for saving costs on roads and infrastructure, and strong support for an extension to the current timetable and embedding it as a permanent service. There was support for Te Huia to continue the full 5-year trial period with the current level of subsidy. Expansion of passenger rail connections is a key part of providing sustainable and resilient transport solutions for the region, and continued engagement on opportunities to address barriers to the uptake of rail and facilitate mode shift. So it pretty much covers all of the objective areas of the RLTP. In terms of rail freight, the Waikato region continues to provide a nationally significant role in the distribution of freight. And the draft RLTP highlights the opportunities to enhance freight efficiency and mode shift to rail, like with the Ruakura Super Hub. It's consistent with the GPS to continue to invest in the national rail freight network to support the overall objective of economic growth and productivity. The GPS has a particular focus on the most productive parts of the existing rail network between Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga. So we received some submission points specific to rail freight, I should say, and that include improvements to the North Island main trunk line, support for an integrated freight system and policies associated with rail, rapid rail and rail freight. It contributes to climate change resilience and safety, the need for additional implementations, actions and policies in the RLTP in response to submit a request, but that's further down in the recommendations. Advocacy for better utilisation of existing rail infrastructure for the movement of freight to and from the region. And there was just support overall for the opportunities, policies and actions in the plan. That's it. We're on to recommendations. So does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Kimberly. Any discussion on the rail? Angela?
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. Was there any mention of electrification in the submissions? Just can't quite recall. Electrifying from Hamilton through to Pukekohe.
There is in our plan, we have got supporting advocacy for electrification. Can't quite remember off the top of my head if there was a specific submit a request for that, but
It's already
I
in
can
our
find
plan
out.
though, eh?
It's in our plan.
Okay, no, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Eugene?
I think WDC mentioned that in their submission.
Okay.
They did, yep.
Got a resolution there, the amendments to rail. Can I have a mover and a second? Thanks, Eugene, and a seconder for that. Put your hands up. Yep, Len. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, folk. Oh yeah, we'll do the last one, coastal shipping. Yeah, okay. Got a little mice in my ear saying do one more. Okay. So yep, we've got coastal shipping.
I'll
Who's
do
Madeline?
this last
Yep.
one really quick then. There was quite a surprisingly large number of submissions which were future focused and talked about coastal shipping and other ways of particularly getting freight and in particular out of the Coromandel. And it was really great to see because it was actually a component of the last RLTP and it was quite a strong component, future looking, as I say. And so really submitters just saw it as a great opportunity to build resilience into the transport system, and we agree. So basically, we want to retain the coastal shipping provisions in the plan. The reason why it's in here is because it was removed from the GPS activity classes, but we still believe, like I say, the front end of the document has a 10 to 30 year view that we need to be thinking about this sort of thing, at least at a policy level to start with. So short and
Madeline.
sweet.
Yep, Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madeline, and great to see that support there. Couple of things. First of all, I'm not sure whether it became clear throughout this process, but Thames Coromandel is about to open in June the Kopu Marine facility, which is a brand new wharf, which has not been there before, so it has not been able to access the Kopu and Thames area through any kind of wharf facility until now. So that is an exciting new development, which should open the doors, but also the Sugarloaf, which is up just south of Coromandel town, is also under development. Now, whether it's worth having those two new facilities in there as part of the narrative, just to strengthen that long-term argument, the significant investments on the part of ourselves, WRC have contributed. Can I just ask through the chair, David, whether that $30 million Whakakotahi fund for coastal shipping and infrastructure, that's gone now, isn't it? Completely disappeared. So this is about future thinking. This is about providing resilience. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because you can invest a lot of money for not a lot of payback, but if you have to be looking to the future. So I'll just add those two developments in there, which could be to help to strengthen the argument.
David?
Probably, sorry, just worth noting that coastal shipping in a very, very similar vein also came up in the Bay of Plenty Regional Transport Plan, both from submitters in East Cape and Portakey, looking at resilience for the investment they've got up there, but also in Tauranga, because quite a lot of push for coastal shipping solutions in and around Tauranga. So it's not inconsistent with what the Bay of Plenty also had to do.
Right, okay, we've got a resolution here for, oh, sorry, Angela.
Yeah, yeah, probably just in agreement with Mayor Len and David. Yeah, especially Thames Coromandel for aquaculture growing up there, getting goods to market. Also note as well, it makes sense for freight, but I know you're very keen up there for ferries for people as well. So yeah, I'd be in favour of keeping it in the RLTP as well.
Okay, we'll move her in a second. Oh, sorry.
I'm happy to move, just conscious there's, from the Taupo district, there's nothing in this for us, unless of course sea level rise renders all of you aquatic districts in the meantime, but I'm happy to move.
So it comes through the chair. If sea level rise gets to the point where there is a connection with Taupo, opens the door.
You're happy to you're happy to second this, Len? Okay, all those in favour? Aye, those against? Carried. Now we've probably got a 15 to 20-minute discussion if you want to get this, finalised now before lunch. Nigel was.
Yeah, so the final item really for conversation today is the references in the report to seeking legal advice in terms of significance. So the question was whether you wanted to do that before lunch or after lunch.
So we're looking at 15, 20 minutes if you want, and then have lunch at 12:30, and then for those that need to get away can get away at lunch. Is that everyone happy with that? Yep, crack on. Okay.
So I think Nigel wants me to start this conversation. So as you'll see, there are references in the report to the topic of transparency of decision making and significance of decision making in the context of the journey that we've been on with this process, where we had consultation underway that closed on the day that the government policy statement came out. We extended our hearings date by a month in order to get more certainty around people's views on the draft government policy statement, but also await the release of the State Highway Investment Proposal, the SHIP document. And we're now at a point where we need to make decisions on this group's part in order to make a recommendation to the Regional Transport Committee on the 21st of June. And the question of what is the decision that is being made and how does it sit in the context of transparency of decision making comes back round. So we have, as we said in the report, sought a legal opinion on that, and it concludes that the government policy statement and the State Highway Investment Proposal are significant documents, and a first read of the legislation suggests that there would be a need for us to reconsult on aspects of that. The contra view is that we allowed late submissions to our process. We allowed speakers to our hearings to speak about the content of the government policy statement and the State Highway Investment Proposal, and specifically we sought a presentation from Waka Kotahi staff to that discussion, where they took us through the plan. In addition, it's the introduction of things like the roads of national significance and the way that they change our program. And the question is whether we've given people the chance to say whether they felt that was a good idea or not. Both of those projects were in the draft plan. They weren't called RONs, but they were both in there, and we did receive submissions on them from parties that have been mentioned by the team today, all of which were in favour. In addition, those projects, if they're funded by the agency or by government and delivered by the agency, would go through their own consultation in terms of designations, design decisions, intersection locations, type and form, etc. So where we've kind of got to is that we think that we are relatively safe to proceed, and we'd welcome your thoughts on that. We think that if the final government policy statement or any of the decisions that get made within the funding for state highway projects, or any of the funding decisions that get made by councils as part of long-term plan processes, adjust the programme in a significant way, that there is the process of variation to the RLTP that we can follow through standard regional transport committee processes. And if you felt that there was a need for that consultation to occur, it could occur on those targeted matters at the right time and be part of an RTC conversation. So it's important that we put that to you, because it is quite a key part of one of the biggest risks that has presented itself to us across this entire process. And it's important that as a committee or subcommittee, you have a chance to consider that in terms of what you'd like us to do, but also how you'd like us to frame this topic in the context of this going back to Regional Transport Committee in June. So that's the introduction. We're all happy to answer any questions on that, but keen to get your thoughts.
Madeline, did you want to add to that?
Can I just add to what Phil's saying? And I think the decisions that you've made today, particularly around the prioritised program, I think that, you know, I said it at the beginning, but because you're only changing the flavour, you're not changing things, you know, significantly within that list. From that point of view, and given that there was submitted support for the relative position of project priorities, again, I'll reiterate, I think that you can safely say that you're consistent with GPS, and the significance of those changes aren't huge. Same with the regional policy framework. I think that there is ample evidence with the recommendations that you've endorsed today that we will be moving further towards being more consistent than by the changes we'll make to the document. So overall, I think you can say that the amended document will be more consistent with the GPS, and that in the context of the submitted issues and what went out for consultation, I think you, and what Phil has said, that we can feel that we have satisfied that requirement, and that the significance isn't such that it should trigger reconsultation now, because we know there are some important national policy decisions down track that could trigger having to reconsult, and you would not want to do that twice in the space of 6 months. So that's just a final point.
I endorse exactly what you've just said, Madeline. I think, you know, with the changes in the GPS and the ship, and, you know, the amendments that we've made through the submitters that have written or presented, that are not major changes. So, you know, I'm happy with it. How does everyone else feel, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm happy with the decisions we've made and comfortable with that. So we've had a legal opinion on this, yeah?
So we referenced in the report that we were seeking legal opinion, legal advice on that topic. Yes.
But we are seeking, or have?
We have received that just literally late Friday. So
Okay, because I would be more comfortable reading that for myself, not suggesting we delay a decision on it, but I just, for my own peace of mind, would be comfortable just having a quick flick through that. But I have no discomfort with anything we've done today or decisions we've made. The context of existing policy statements.
Well, this is getting presented to the Regional Transport Committee on the 21st of June, so there's time for, you know, just to read that.
Between now and then,
come through, yeah.
So if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. And if there's, we can support that with full knowledge of what's in that at the Regional Transport Committee.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. Len?
Thank you. And I would endorse what Kevin said, and also what Madeline said about we would not want to go out again. We're in probably already in submission fatigue mode in our district with LTPs, with representation review, with RLTP stuff and a swimming pool consultation. Yeah. So, I guess the one thing that is going to get people fired up is something that is outside of the control of this committee, and that is the level of investment, the level of funding available. But I think that the work, and I fully endorse and support the work that's been done here. So I would be keen to support going out again.
Eugene, Rodney, you want to comment? You happy? Yep. Angela? David? Okay, a resolution there that the Regional Land Transport move that the staff amend the draft Regional Transport Plan to ensure consistency with the government policy statement and land transport, the State Highway 1 investment proposal and road controlling authorities update transport activity programs and any consequential amendments as a result of these changes. And then number 2, that the staff prepare a final version of the Regional Land Transport Plan for recommendation by the Regional Transport Committee to the Waikato Regional Council for adoption. Mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Rodney. Moved and a seconder, Eugene. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, team. I'd just like to endorse again to Phil and your team. You know, exceptional circumstances this year, just with stuff coming out late and getting us through to this time, and you know, the plan now be ratified by the committee and then sent off to Wakakotahi. I'd just like to congratulate all the hard work that the staff have done and behind the scenes and made our job easier. And then also, you know, I think we weren't too far off with our regional transport plan, you know, considering of what's come out in between there and to ratify this. So thank you again from this subcommittee, and also I'd say from the committee as well. I'm on that. Thanks very much. So we'll finish with a one. Oh, yep. Sorry.
I'll just make a technical note that on the recommendation that we've just made, that therefore concludes the business of the subcommittee. So the subcommittee is by that nature disbanded and parked for future use. No, I'm not quite going to word it like that. And the minutes will come through to Regional Transport Committee for confirmation.
Yep. Sorry, I forgot to add thank you for the people that put their hand up to be on the subcommittee for the deliberations. Thanks very much for your time and your passion into it. Kevin.
Sorry, Mike, Dave just triggered something for me in that. The comments you've just made, I totally endorse them. Can we just add to that last resolution the thanks that you've just given to staff, because it's an outstanding body of work that you've done. You've made our job not simple, but a whole lot easier than it could otherwise have been. So thank you for that. And can we just, I'd like that to be recorded, if you don't mind, Mike.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. You happy with that, Rodney and Eugene? You know, in the person seconder? Yep. Okay, we'll finish with the Karakia. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Unahia mai te uru tapanui, kia watia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hininaro, I te ara takutu, koera e rungo e whakaria e ake ki runga, kia tina, hui e, taki e.
Thank you, team. Lunch is ready in there if you want to, or next door.